this is not one of Nidalee's traps that the Vestians got caught in, which means someone else has been in Nidalee's territory setting up traps. And are big cats territorial?
No.
Okay,
wait,
good.
Wait,
Never
one second.
mind.
Let me check my notes.
Let me check my notes. Starts Googling cougars in my area.
Welcome to Casuals of Runeterra, episode 134. I'm your host, Ryan, here with your other host, Ash.
You forgot the number 2.
What?
1, 2, 3, 4. I'll teach you how to count later.
God damn it. Who knew this late in my life an old dog would learn new tricks?
It's never too late to learn, because knowledge is power.
It's funny you mention knowledge because, housekeeping, you can listen to us everywhere, right? You can visit us at podcastcore.com for all of our info. Email us at podcastcore@gmail.com if you want to get in contact. Remember, that's COR. And then follow us on all the platforms because we're on all the platforms. And leave a like and comment because we want to hear from you.
And there was an awkward pause there. Like I was expecting, I was expecting you to piss me off.
Lately, I've been switching it up a bit to see. I like to watch Hedge to see how he responds when things don't go as planned. It's called a social experiment. Ooh.
Why do I still come to the show?
Tell a friend to be warned by listening to the Casuals of Runeterra podcast.
Oh, and the consequences of not being warned are dire.
We're talking about, and if you listen to our last episode, you know, Nidalee again, but her story, Human Blood. And this is a fun one. It's a Disney adventure that turns dark, which I guess is just a Disney adventure pre-Disney. We know most fairy tales are dark to begin with, and it kind of fits right in there.
Yeah, like this is a really good one because we get to see kind of more of Nidalee just in her natural habitat, right? Like not so much as far as like her impact on an overarching story or her impact with other champions. So this is just a day in the shoes of Nidalee. So it's something a little more simple like this is really nice to cover, especially for a character that is as interesting as Nidalee is, because if you listen to our bio episode, you know that she's in a world of her own. There's no one else like Nidalee. And that's one of the reasons her and Nico hit it off really well, because there's no one else like her. So getting to see what a day in the Nidalee shoes is like is something that's very unique. So let's dive into it.
Yeah. So story is best told in 3 parts. So this one will be as well. We start with a loud cracking sound and the smell of gunpowder. And Nidalee goes to investigate. And as she's investigating, you know this is not her first rodeo because she decides to conceal her spear behind a trunk and scan the environment. So she kind of looks unarmed, right? And she sees a Vestian male with reptilian features because you remember they can be kind of homunculus-like or chimera-like, pick your word for it. They can be different animals. This one specifically has reptilian features. And he's in pain because his tail is caught in a metal trap. And the fact that it's a metal trap is an important distinction here.
Yeah, because if you've listened to our bio, you know that once Nidalee gets more accustomed to her human form, she does start forming traps throughout her territory. And of course, being raised by jungle cats or the paka, like these traps that she's making is what the jungle provides her. And last I checked, I did not see her create a forge and melt down precious minerals to create pure iron to then build her traps. So this is not one of Nidalee's traps that the Vestians got caught in, which means someone else has been in Nidalee's territory setting up traps. Are big cats territorial?
No.
Okay,
wait,
good.
one second. Let me check my notes.
Let me check my notes. Starts Googling cougars in my area.
For the listener, yes, if you didn't know, cats are one of the most totalitarian. Hedge, save me.
They're very territorial.
Yes.
If you get and like this counts for pretty much any kind of big cat and even some small cats too, like lynxes and bobcats.
Yes.
Like they if you get into what they deem as their territory, they will either choose to fight to defend it or at the very least try to chase you out of it, right? Like they're not going to give it up easily.
Yeah.
And so
And she
Nidalee
has
is going to
cubs
make
too. There
yes.
are younglings that need to be protected.
Yeah, because even though she's not a pure Paka herself, she is the leader of her pack. So she's going to make sure that her family's taken care of. So this is a very important distinction that it's a metal trap because someone else was here, and that's not good.
Yes, yes. So over this Vestine is standing a human, which that's already red flag, right? Human in the Amazon. And they're standing over the Vestian holding what's described as a wooden covered metal barrel that could fire lethal seeds. So a gun, probably manufactured in America and imported into Runeterra. And Nidalee steps out from behind the tree and purposefully crunches leaves so that she can get their attention. And the man turns around. He keeps the gun trained on the Vestian, but then he notices, oh, fuck, she's hot. And Nidalee's aware of this part of her transformation when she goes human form, and she used that to her advantage as a hunter. And this isn't like the guy we love so much, Edward Santangelo, the
Oh,
OG.
I
No,
miss Edward.
this human sucks. Edward is dope. This human sucks.
Yeah, Edward. If Edward was this human, like Nidalee would have remarked that there was a human over this Vestian, and
Yeah.
instead of a gun trained on the human, the Edward would be trying to open the trap while asking the Vestian very like probing and inappropriate questions.
Yeah.
Like, how does your tribe reproduce?
As he hits the gritty.
Someone please animate that for me. I need that in my life.
We know we talk a lot about like our Annie episode and stuff like that. Our Edward Santangelo episode is one of our favorite. Check it out. He's a beloved character, and I hope he gets fleshed out more.
Yeah, and I
Maybe
wish
he's still alive.
I wish he had some bearing on this story. He doesn't. We just love him, and we wish he was here because I would love to see what he wrote about Nidalee.
So this takes us to part 2, and the man fully lets his guard down. So he stops pointing the gun at the Vestia, and that's when she moves to grab her spear and launches it at the man. And he barely dodges it, but he's struck by Nidalee in, as Hetch mentioned, her cougar form. Now, this isn't a hotter form. This is an actual cougar.
This is not one of the ads that you will get when you're looking at inappropriate sites. This is a fight or die situation.
Yes. And she sinks her claws into his skin and then bites down slightly on his neck before transforming back into her human form.
And one of the things that's really cool about this, like props to Riot on this one, because with big cats, they do the way that they hunt since they tend to not be pack hunters. So the Paka are very different, obviously fantasy characters, but whatever. Since they're not traditionally pack hunters, they tend to aim for windpipe, choke you out real quick, and then move your corpse. Like they're not like other kind of animals that will be like, oh yeah, just rip them alive and get your food. Like, so this is a nice little detail there, and that's one of the things that definitely kind of sets Nidalee apart from her brothers and sisters, is that she does have like the human mentality of being able to like, okay, I'm gonna kind of hold you here. I'm not gonna kill you. I'm gonna hold you here, and I'm gonna give you a chance.
Yeah. And when she transforms back to her human form, she says, in English, quote unquote, you will leave or you will die. Understand? And then she tears off a piece of his shirt and goes to disarm the trap and tend to this Vestian that's trapped in it. And once the Vestayan is free, he lunges at the man, but Nidalee grabs him and kind of holds him in place, and the man takes his opportunity to run off.
And this is like I I'm kind of would be more curious to see if we could get more details of how Nidalee got to this point because this is a very deep look at her humanity.
Yeah.
And what we covered in her bio, she doesn't have any interactions with humanity for the entirety of her adolescence. So the fact that she does have the showing of humanity here is very interesting, not just because she spared the hunter's life, but she also spared it a second time by stopping the Vestayan.
Yeah.
Because I don't blame the guy. Like I get caught in a bear trap. I'm gonna be mad,
Yeah.
like at the very least, I'm gonna be swinging. Like, I don't know if I kill the guy who set the trap, but I
Yeah.
would swing on him,
Yeah.
like so. I like it's very interesting to see Nidalee show this kind of humanity and this moral compass, despite the fact that she was raised wild. There's no place for a moral compass in the jungle, right?
Yep.
It is live or die, period. So that moral compass being displayed here, it's be interesting to see how she got to there because we know in her bio that we don't really know how she got that. She was raised to be wild.
Great point. Great point. And that's what the Vestayan asks. He's like, "Hey, why'd you let him go?" And she says that what they'll do is they'll follow the trail of blood, and if his group of poachers do not leave, they will die together. So it's kind of like it's a very smart play on her behalf because, like Hetch mentioned, this is a high level of morality to say I'm letting him go, but we're also going to make sure they heed our word. And if not, we now put ourselves in the situation to solve the complete problem, which is the group rather than just one poacher. Very smart, right? And then he asked, "Okay, cool. Why did you call him human? Because you're human. That's very weird for you to approach another human and say that." And Nidalee told him, "No, I'm like you." And Vestayan said, "No, the fuck you're not." and, and Hetch mentioned earlier, like, if a Vestayan doesn't know what you are, there's something wonky going on.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the reasons I like this story is because Nidalee's very unique. She's not fully Vestayan. She's definitely not human. So it's like, okay, what is the deal with Nidalee? And there's no one else like her out there. And the Vestayan just kind of hammers that point home. But holy cow, is Nidalee cunning? I mean, just showing the humanity here, but also being like, yeah, no, we're gonna go get all of them. All
Yeah.
right. Like if I'm gonna kill, I'm not taking one. I'm taking the whole squad out. All right. Like, dude, there are no ops in my territory.
No one spins back quite like Nidalee. And back to the vagueness of her identity, we talked at length at the end of our last episode about some theories we had, and here we have the Vestayan kind of hammering home something Hetch and I factored into our analysis, which is that she is human. Some part of her is human. So, with that being a fact, let's say we're taking this as a reputable source from this Vestayan, then how do we get there? And that's when we started to talk about like, magic and pregnancies and stuff like that with like Annie and what could play into this.
Yeah, and I mean, we could probably go on a whole episode
Oh,
of
yeah.
just trying to break down like the as far as like the rules that we know of Runeterra from reading all the different stories, like or at least our understanding of how like that world works.
Yeah.
That could be a whole episode by itself, but I mean, it just hammers home the point that Nidalee is not a common thing. And like Nidalee is Nidalee.
Yeah.
And no one really knows how she got there. So the yeah, so as far as with trying to figure out that's like the origins of Nidalee, we could take a whole day
Yeah.
probably. We would have to have an intermission in that episode.
Yeah. So she finishes tending to his wounds, and this is where we want to reinforce what we spoke about before, where she's developed medicinal properties, well, not properties, but expertise, which is because now she has opposable thumbs, which helps. But also, This is not something that only she does for herself, but we know she has a relationship with not only the Vestians, but wildlife in the area. She's become more than just for her pack, right? And she tells him, okay, cool. Now that you're on board, join us for at nighttime and we're gonna hunt. And he's like, fuck yeah. And we go to
Yeah.
part three.
Yeah. I mean, are you really gonna say no to Nidalee at this point? Like, like
Never.
you're
I
not
would
gonna
never,
say.
no, I would never, whatever she wants.
I mean, well, I agree with you, but
Yeah.
I'm sure we're both thinking of completely different reasons than what
Oh,
this
my bad.
episode's about.
Sorry, listeners.
But there's no way that the guy's gonna say no because it's like one, she saved his life. Two, she just laid out a very cunning plan of like, yo, we're going to like kill them all or not kill them at all, and then it's like, oh, she's also keeps saying we hunt. Who's we? And this giant Paka just jumped this human hunter to save my life. I don't want to meet we on the other side of the team. You know, like I want to be on the same sideline when I meet we. So
that's actually a good point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fall in line, right?
Mm-hmm.
So she has I would say natural born leader, but she kind of it's more nurture than nature, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Which kind of makes sense. She's a matriarch of her pack now, so it makes sense that she would kind of have more of a nurturing attitude, at the very least, to things that she does not deem a threat. Because honestly, this Vestian's very lucky that she did not deem him as a threat, since all this is happening in her territory. Because if she was more like, if she didn't have that moral compass, she probably would have just ripped them both to shreds, right?
True. So in part three, we now shift to the camp of poachers where Percy, so this is the man from before, is telling his fellow hunters about Nidalee. And they don't believe him because they suck. But also they're probably drinking and doing other debaucherous things. And this is a common thing, though, for humans that visit the Ixtali jungle, because not many people do, and the people that do don't have good intentions, so usually don't make it back to tell other people. And when you tell people about, hey, I saw this magical creature in the part of the world that no one goes, they're not going to trust you, right? Like the Amazon rainforest, if you look at the past, before we had a lot of documentaries, a lot of filming and stuff like that happening, you would have that same thing where you would have the biology of these creatures or these types of birds and types of frogs come out in research, and other researchers wouldn't believe it, right? Until they saw it. It's like, well, how does that frog do this? No other frog does that. Well, there you go, right? Now we have more of an access to that world, but in this situation, they don't, right? It's word of mouth, which is the best way to spread our podcast. So don't forget that.
Yeah, that's why it's up in at this point of the story, as well as in our housekeeping up top.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, I don't get it as far as like, if you're going to be out in the middle of no man's land, right? This is uncharted territory. No, like, you already should know that you don't fully understand everything that's going to be there.
Mm-hmm.
So to just immediately write off what someone says about what's going on there is one thing if we're talking about it over drinks in a restaurant safely within human society,
Piltover,
right? Like if they were having this conversation at Piltover, it's like, yeah, you're insane. You did not see that. No way. That's not possible. Yeah. But if you're in the middle of that said area, no one knows what's going on. Dude comes back wounded and tells you what wounded him. I don't care how far-fetched it is. I'm going to be like, maybe we should get some distance between us, you know? Like maybe we should probably move camp. Like let's get somewhere that's a little, you know, less dense so we can see what's coming, right?
Yeah.
I would have just write him off entirely. I would probably call him a little crazy. Like, okay, that sounds a little far-fetched, but you did get wounded. So let's prepare, right? No, these guys are just I like how it says here that they with his guitar, sing a lewd prayer to the queen of the jungle while the other two guffaw and dance. Like, no, I'm not doing that. You're insane at that point, all right? You're begging to die.
So, yeah, they keep taunting him, and he's like, fuck y'all. He goes off to take a piss. And then he notices the laughs and the sounds from the camp behind him suddenly stop. Then he notices a bunch of glowing eyes in the bushes around him, and the eyes closest to him were emerald green. And a voice close to his ear says, "You were warned." And he didn't even have a chance to scream before sharp teeth closed around his throat, and this time they did not stop.
And this is why, if you're in the middle of the area that is uncharted and not fully understood, that you're allowed to take things with a grain of salt, but let's just be on the safe side. It's not going to hurt you to go out to a more open area so you can see what's coming and maybe set up a watch
Yeah.
so that you make it through the night, right? Like, but just to write it off as like, oh yeah, you're insane. Let's get pissed drunk. Yeah, no, these guys deserve to die. Idiots.
So that's it. That's where our story ends. So now we're in the back half here where Hedge and I kind of just chat about a few things. So one thing we wanted to hint at is in our next episode, keep an eye out for that because the next character we're going to talk about, like Nidalee has opened our, like Nidalee and Nico have opened our eyes on what further style of creatures, and I don't mean that derogatory, but like what style of creatures still exist, right? With unknown beginnings and backgrounds to keep it interesting and fresh outside of, your standard fantasy tropes. And the next character is going to open up a side of the world that even more kind of expounds on what we know. Because we have the spirit realm, we have Nico's Vestayan realm, we have, you know, Mount Targon and what goes on up there. We have all these different places, and there's still more that even at this point in the amount of episodes we've done, we haven't revealed to you yet. So there's a little
Yes.
taste there to keep you
Yes.
coming back.
Yeah, I mean, if you are kind of curious as to like just how much we've covered, um, I've said this in so many episodes, and
Mhm.
this just kind of shows off how nerdy I am. But open up the map of Runeterra and then go and look as far as these areas that we're talking about, because Shurima is beyond vast, and in reality, we have talked about maybe a quarter of like all of the Shurima territory, right?
Yeah.
Because there's only so many places that are actually habitable. We've only gotten to look at like nomads. They don't stay in one spot. Like they have to keep moving to survive.
Yeah.
And then all this others like all like that great desert is just uncharted territory. Then like even with the more populated areas like Demacia and Noxus, these are very large kingdoms that are forever either trying to expand their borders or defend the farthest reaches of their lands from other people's expansions.
Yeah.
And there are people intertwined in between all of this empty space, well, quote unquote empty space, that we don't get to talk about too much
Yeah.
because, we're seeing it through the eyes of the champions of these stories. And that just leaves so much area open, not only for stories to come out, which is great for us because we like to read them and talk about them, but it's not an episode of Casuals if we don't say this. So much area to cover in an MMO, right? Like
Yeah.
we, right? You keep teasing us, all right, and we keep teasing ourselves at this point because we just want it. We just want to see that because like we get to see if you study a lot of like even like real world history that the people within a city are very different from people that are at the edges of conflict,
Mhm.
right? Because they have to be different because life is completely uh, like your goals in life are completely different because you have to choose about your aspirations or just survival.
Yeah.
And that's something that like especially like here in the US, it's something that people can take for granted, but as far as like when you're writing a story, that means that somebody from intercity Demacia is going to be very different than someone who grew up on war-torn soil that is currently under Noxus control, but they still have some old veterans that talk about when Demacia ruled it.
Yeah.
And that just opens so many doors, so many possibilities for these stories that we can cover. And the more that we get deeper into these different champions, the more that we get to look at that stuff.
Yeah,
And that's the kind of stories that you could put in an MMO and just go to town with it, right?
and that's well said as always, Hetch. And the only punctuation on that I can say is that this is a reminder, like we've mentioned in the previous episode, if Riot messes up this MMO lore wise, then they made that decision. Because even for my Runation book review listeners, book club guys, you know how well written that book is, and that person, that author, is on the staff for writing this as well for the MMO. So they have all the pieces in place, and all they have to do is put it together. And like we always say, hey, you know where to find us. We're not going anywhere.
Yeah, we're not going anywhere. And
Right? If you
and
need our help, if you have to
yeah,
call the Avengers, we're
yeah.
we're on speed dial.
And we're so excited. We're so excited to talk about it because not only with all these war torn areas, but there's also all these kind of, for lack of a better description, parallel dimensions
Yes.
around Runeterra as well. Bandle City, Yordles. But you also,
I forgot. You know what's great is Hedge goes on this beautiful monologue, and then we remember he's racist against Europe.
I'm not racist, but yeah, but that.
Yeah.
Like I bring it up though because like Bandle City
Yeah.
doesn't exist on the physical plane of Runeterra. We've gone at great length as recently as far as like Ionia and their relationship with the spirit world, which obviously spirit world that's not on the physical plane. And there's still so much of these things that aren't at eye level that we haven't looked at. And I don't want to like give it away outright
Good.
because our next episode is going to be looking really deep at like well, there's your hint. We're gonna look really deep at some one of these areas that we have not really gotten to
Yes.
dive into yet, and that's a really good hint. I feel like it's giving away too much,
Yeah.
and I hope I hope like most of the listeners are gonna be stumped about that hint, because I feel like if you are stumped and then we get to that episode, you're gonna be like, oh my god, that what a deep cut. And
Hedge, if we give them any more cheesy bread, they won't eat the entree. Okay, we're gonna leave it there. All right. So as always,
do you really want to eat the entree over the cheesy bread at Red Lobster?
God damn it. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back soon with the next episode.
Cheese and bread? Yes.
That's not even a deep cut. That's recent. All right, listeners, you better be laughing.
Oh, I have a headache now. Take care, everybody.